Hey, it's DJ. And today I want to talk about reality. What's the deal? Now, I'm going to try to make this short, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I've talked about this kind of stuff in all other kinds of papers and videos that I've done. But, all right, so there's multiple, what is reality, right? There's multiple ways we can look at this. Well, we can talk about the reality that we actually observe. The phenomenal reality that we actually experience. And then we could talk about the reality as it exists in itself. And what's the relationship between the two? And so I think a really good example to illustrate this is the phenomenon of color. So when the basic commonly accepted understanding of color is that we see certain colors that exist as certain wavelengths of light. And the actual phenomenon of color doesn't actually exist out there as such. What exists is certain wavelengths of light, right? That's kind of the basic idea there. And so, in that sense, the reality in itself is something that creates certain wavelengths, electromagnetic radiation, or whatever that is. That would be a reality in itself. And then the phenomenal reality, the reality we experience, is the reality of actual color phenomenally, the qualia of redness. Okay, right? And so, what does certain mainstream theories say about the relationship between the two? Okay, well, the mainstream notion of epiphenomenalism would say that the reality in itself just works as it does, and that our experience of it is just the emergent property of the electrical signals and all the happenings in our brain. There are neuronal communication, neuronal networks in our brain, which consciousness emerges, the phenomenal experience of consciousness emerges out of the reality in itself. And so the epiphenomenalism paradigm is that the actual phenomenal reality doesn't actually feed back and change the reality in itself. Okay? That consciousness just emerges from the reality in itself, what we perceive as states in our brain, electrical signalings in our brain, but our experience of that doesn't feed into and change the reality in itself. Because the mainstream notion is that consciousness is just the byproduct of brain states. Okay? And so, based on that theory, where does the reality in you experience even exist? They say it just emerges out of your brain, and creates it somehow, but it doesn't actually, feed back and change the reality in itself. It's just a kind of epiphenomenal dualism that, there is a sort of, you have an experience, but that experience is just the byproduct. It doesn't really do anything. It's just something that, just happened to come about. And they say, it happened to come about and evolve. But, if it doesn't actually feed back and do anything, why would it even evolve? And so this also changes that notion of what the reality in itself is, because I don't accept that epiphenomenal paradigm. And that's based on, and the idea of consciousness emerging based on the mainstream paradigm, emerging out of a reality in itself, deals with, a premise of reductionism, and it's only a weak emergence. So this is the kind of difference between different types of emergence. The weak emergence is a certain property that emerges out of a system to which that system doesn't have in itself, but when it's weakly emergent, and this is kind of how I define it, because I think that the construct is whether or not the emergent property feeds back and causes change in its lower level structures. The mainstream notion of reductionism would say, no, it doesn't. And so consciousness can emerge out of the reality through the arrangement of life, and then how life, and then life becoming a human, and then human interaction in the brain. So consciousness emerges out of that reality as a certain byproduct of that world. And then so the phenomenal experience is just something emerging out of that reality, a reality in which itself doesn't have phenomenal experience, and a reality in which itself just works based on its laws and theoretical laws of behavior, of which the conscious experience doesn't actually affect. That's the mainstream theory. I mean, well, basically, or at least that's most popular theory, right? I don't call it the mainstream, but you got to understand the reductionism, epiphenomenalism. I was taught this in school as a philosophy student. This is very clearly. And okay, I'm already at 6 minutes. I didn't want to go this long, but I still got a little more to say here. How can you make what is the most profound topic of all time into a short little video that people will watch? I don't know, but I'm not stopping now. All right, so, and this is where, do you follow me here? You see, do you see how that is? At least, do you get, everything's just physics, and the physics of, it's reductionism would be, the smallest parts and the action that dictates the smallest parts, and there's nothing over and above. Those parts can create emergent properties, but that emergent property doesn't feed back and change the action of those parts. It's just a subsidiary, it's a byproduct of the parts. And that's what the epiphenomenalism paradigm in mainstream science, mainstream philosophy suggests. That that's all that's happening here is a universe existing in itself, following certain physical laws, which just happen to arrange themselves to create life, which then just happens to evolve to the point of having consciousness emerge out of it in a certain, that the arrangements of the states of the brain emerge the conscious experience. But that conscious experience doesn't feed back and affect the reality in itself at all. That's the philosophical paradigm that I was basically taught in school, I do not support it. And I think there are better viewpoints out here which basically deal with a premise of strong emergence and a fundamental consciousness and non-local information communication to create systems over and above the sum of their parts. And if you're interested in reading some scientific papers on this, I would recommend Unified Physics and the Entanglement Nexus of Awareness by William Brown and Nassim Haramein. Also, Nassim has a paper, The Unified Space Memory Network from Cosmogenesis to Consciousness. That's a really good one too, I'd recommend. If you want to look in orchestrated objective reduction, Stuart Hemmerhoff and Sir Roger Penrose's theory, that's a good one. And the point is that in the position I'm trying to communicate, that my challenge to that mainstream model is that, well, actually, the conscious experience does feed back and affect the reality in itself. Because the reality in itself is ultimately not some material space-time world just following laws of physics based on local action only, which would mean, action only mediated through a spatio-temporal framework. And so this posits an overall framework to the universe, which is essentially a non-local communication system, able to create systems over and above the sum of their parts. And all this has to do with, the evidence for it is quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement challenges heavily that whole basis of local causation. And that, basically of materialism as well, because, that would make sense. The exclusivity of local causation would make sense in a material world where everything is only contained within itself, and action only happens from things just bumping into each other, or maybe like radiating out into a field, and not a local communication where everything is connected through this non-local signaling, and so everything is connected within a greater whole, which allows the whole to feed back and affect the parts, a top-down causation. And so through a fundamental consciousness, a fundamental awareness, there can be that sort of communication which allows systems to emerge, which allows emergence, strong emergence, which is causative awareness, So a strong emergence would say that the whole can feed back and affect its parts. Okay, that the system emerges new properties, and that those properties affect the parts below it, and then top-down causation, feedback, feed-forward loop. Okay, because the mainstream model would say that there is, reductionism and epiphenomenalism is that only weak emergence, and this is all out there, please look it up. Just read stuff about this all the time. It's very clearly, people, they deny strong emergence in the mainstream position. Or if you don't prefer to be called mainstream, it's at least a major prevailing position overarching the scientific community in our society. Okay? They teach it in schools, man. What's more mainstream than what the schools teach? They very clearly taught me reductionism in schools. And epiphenomenalism. And so I challenge that premise in favor of a position explained in some of the papers I'd mentioned. Particularly, if you want to just only look at one, I'd read one that directly deals with the idea that our actual experience is entangled with the reality in itself, and our experience informs the reality in itself and changes how it works. Huge. And that's, the basis of what we're, call a co-creator of our reality, because our experience changes the way the actual universe works. Our experience isn't just a meaningless byproduct that happens to emerge out of a fundamental reality in itself. The fundamental reality in itself is a communication process which ultimately has non-local signaling to be able to create systems over and above the sum of their parts, and to inform itself through the Unified Space Memory Network, read that paper, and that creates that systems over and above the sum of their parts, able to feed back and create a whole system synergy, which feeds back in top-down causation. This philosophical point is huge. Okay? That changes the entire notion of mainstream science. Now, it doesn't mean everything that we could call science is wrong. It challenges the overall philosophy. It's all about the philosophy. This is a video about philosophy, okay? Now, if you could say, I don't do philosophy. Okay, great. You know what? It's more closer to philosophy than science. It certainly isn't science. Telling people what to do, making up rules, making up mandates. That's not science. No. So if you don't want to do philosophy, fine. Then don't ever make up a mandate and try to tell me what to do. Because the whole reason I never followed along with any of this COVID nonsense was because I thought it was stupid, and I challenged the philosophy that I was taught in school. Who told you that vaccines are so great? The schools. Who mandates vaccines? The schools. Why didn't I take a vaccine? The vaccine? Because I don't believe what they tell me in schools. And I clearly articulated the whole construct of the whole nature of reality and how it works in consciousness, man. What could be a bigger deal than this? Are you following me here? It's a pretty big deal, guys. Okay, come on. Strong emergence, fundamental consciousness, non-local communication, a whole system over and above the sum of its parts. These things directly challenge the philosophical systems I was taught in schools as a philosophy student. Okay, it's a big deal. And then also, so part of the idea, of reductionism would be that you could figure out the laws of the universe. I wasn't going to go into all this, okay? But, basic reductionism is that, something was described as atoms. So why stop at atoms? It's going to go down to the smallest parts. That's the thing. They kind of reduce things just to a part and then stop. I'm not going to get into all the details here because I got a lot to say about reductionism and why that's wrong. And this is all related to this. But then, that reduces to the smallest level of understanding and that everything is the basic action of that, which would make sense if the world was truly material. And then everything was just a material bit. And everything was just material bits isolated in themselves, which didn't have a communication to connect outside of themselves. And the mechanism that the Unified Space Memory Network posits of how that communication system is non-local has to deal with entanglement through wormholes, micro wormhole network, okay, which allows which allows every proton to have the information of the whole universe contained within it, which allows for that constant updating and allows for the systems to be over and above the sum of their parts through that non-local signaling. Look, if you want all the details, read the papers. All right? I'm just covering the philosophy here. Okay? This is very important because if you want to make up rules and tell me what to do, then you should be able to discuss the philosophy with me. And if you're not, first of all, why do you even think you should be able to make up rules and tell people what to do in the first place? Perhaps some sort of appeal to ethics, some sort of appeal to morality, some sort of appeal to the greater good of society. And then, you got to make your position here. What are those things? How are they compatible with your metaphysical beliefs? What is your position on ethics? And how is that compatible with a materialistic or reductionistic paradigm of the nature of reality? What are you saying here? Right? And then, what is the greater good of society? What is a society? Is society just the individuals? Or is a society something over and above the sum of the individuals? Okay, well, if you're saying it is, then you're denying the whole paradigm. The consistency. You got to have some consistency here. And most of you, none of you who supported COVID mandates, I think, is very good at philosophy at all. You haven't shown me that you are. I've been trying to talk about it the entire time, raising this issue, and never have I had any responses really to it at all. Some people say, we don't need it. No, we don't need philosophy. They say we don't need philosophy if we can observe directly certain things. And it's okay, but do we observe people harming others if they don't vaccinate, if they don't wear a mask? No, we don't at all. It's a theoretical concept. Based on what? So and if you extrapolate reductionism, if you basically have the idea of reductionism, we isolated these things, we know it works this way, right? And it works this way, and then so we know that that'll extrapolate out when we don't isolate everything and we move on to a bigger system over-connected. Yeah, but if its strong emergence is true, then that'll change the diktats of causation, rendering your understanding, at least incomplete, not valid. And so you can't just extrapolate that. Now, if reductionism were true, maybe, you could, right? And that's why you at least have to argue that reductionism is true and that, the systems can't be over and above the sum of their parts and deny strong emergence, which people do. That's why it is the mainstream theory. So, if you want to kind of take that approach, then defend the position. Defend it wholly. I don't know where you're going to get your ethics from, but, right, you got to at least try. That's the thing, you guys won't even try to do the philosophy here. That's why I think you're idiots. You can't even talk philosophy. I've been sitting here. How many posts have I made on the internet? How many videos have I made? Literally hundreds. Total. Of all the, you count all the things I said on Twitter and X, and all the things I said on Facebook. I constantly go over this. I wrote a whole 90-page paper on this. Come on! And you still won't even read read it, you still won't listen, you won't engage, but you'll have no problem telling me what the fuck to do. And then you sit down and go, my body, my choice. Yeah, but when it's my body, it's your fucking choice, huh? Oh, no, we need the government to tell you what to do. The government doesn't tell us what to do, the government only tells you what to do. Oh, really? Based on what constructs? What's your philosophy? What's your metaphysics? What's your foundation of ethics? If you're gonna tell me what to fucking do, then you can at least answer my goddamn questions. I got a little fired up here. I'm a little fire boy. Ooh, ooga chaka, fire boy. I like fire, and I like dancing, and I like tribal. See, look, they do these things in these tribes, right? And they have these rhythms. And they, right, creates a system over and above the sum of its parts. A greater vibration. The spiritual foundations of all belief systems before the Western establishment heavily grounded itself in materialism and reductionism and then pushed that on their global expansion. You think religion was the only type of philosophical, dogmatic, imposing, indoctrinating belief systems by governments? No. That's what I've been covering this whole time, man. 20 minutes strong, 21 minutes. Okay, short video? No, but we're rolling. I think I kind of covered what I wanted to cover here, though. You follow me? I gotta catch my breath, man. Let me take a drink before I do a concluding remarks. I mean, if you watch it this way, you might have to watch another minute. Just give me, literally 5 seconds. Should I go off camera? Woo. I'm back! Hey, it was 10 seconds. Yeah, I know. All right, so the reality in itself, phenomenal reality, the relationship. Does phenomenal experience feed back and affect the reality in itself? My position is yes. I cite certain papers like Unified Physics and the Entanglement Nexus of Awareness. Read it. It's a good paper. I've read it several times. It's great. I love it. And as well as I've studied that whole work a lot. They had a whole course. I've taken that a couple times too. Study this stuff a lot. Okay? And so, what is your position? I have no clue what the philosophical position that many of you take. You just say science. But it's not science. You didn't isolate, you're saying it's science here that we have to do this. But okay, so let's go with masks. It's science that we all have to wear masks now. Okay. Did you take a society, isolate all the variables except for mask wearing, have one society not wear masks, another society everywhere wear masks, and then compare them, measuring all factors that it could possibly be measured, and all factors of health, let's say, all factors of health, happiness, all factors, and measure them to say that wearing masks is necessarily the scientifically best option here. No! Of course you didn't. You say, well, that's infeasible. Okay, but it's not science that we all have to wear masks, because you didn't do science to say we all have to wear masks. Oh, no! Well, we have this science about, how, germs are spread, and, how, what masks do, and so then we take that. Yeah, but see, that would only make sense based on reductionism. If reductionism were true, and that there is no strong emergence, okay, sure. But now, if there is, well then you don't have the scientific evidence on the scale to which you are applying the mandate to really say that the mandate will be helpful. You just think it will be, based on your understanding, right? So, okay, that's what I'm saying. I would love it. I would have a lot more respect for someone if they actually tried to defend reductionism, defend materialism or physicalism, deny strong emergence, counter the points made in the papers I mentioned, counter my philosophy that I talk about. If you really defended that position, I'd have a lot more respect for that than someone who thinks, philosophy doesn't matter, man. We can just tell you what to do. We don't need to listen to any challenges. We can just ignore what anybody else says, and all says, I'm going to just tell you what they know, because what we believe, it's science, so you just have to obey our orders. No, I don't have to obey your orders. Okay? Like, no, that's not how this works. Well, we have the government, and so the government, we elect them, and it's an honest system of government where we elect our leaders, and then through, representational democracy, and it's a fair system and honest. It's the best form of government that ever existed. The other forms of government were corrupt and bad. But this form of government we have now is good and it's honest, and we can trust that when our leaders make our rules, that they're good rules and we all have to follow them. Well, except for the other party. Not them. But when we do it, we can trust that it's honest. But when the other party does it, we can then understand why the government's corrupt. We don't have to listen to them. See, I don't think you have to. I don't tell people what to do other than to tell me not what to do. Right? I don't care if you want to vaccinate, you want to do whatever, you go ahead. I'm not telling you can't. I'm not trying to discriminate against you if you don't do what I want you to do. No, that's not me. That was you. Maybe. Depends on who's watching, obviously. Yeah, right? So, I just want a little more clarity on the philosophy here of anyone who supported COVID mandates. I would like that. That would be nice. If you're so much smarter than me, an anti-vaxxer, anti-masker, then you should be able to do it, right? What are you going to let me just sit here and talk about philosophy and you can't even counter what I'm saying? Can't even engage? That's weird, isn't it? You don't find that weird that, you don't know what the hell you're talking about and you can't challenge the philosophy of someone who you apparently think is too stupid to make decisions for themselves? Well, I can't decide that I don't want the vaccine and still go places. Joe Biden said if I work for a company with 100 people, that I have to get the vaccine. Joe Biden said you won't get COVID if you have these vaccinations. That's just blatantly wrong, too. Without even having to appeal to a greater philosophical dogma. Oh, yeah, what, you with me here? Remember what we talked about here? Reality, consciousness. How do they feed back and affect each other? What's your position? Mine is largely explained in the entanglement, unified physics and the entanglement nexus of awareness. That would be the scientific position, which I find has a good philosophical foundation. I've thought this stuff through, man. I don't just hear stuff and then tell people what to do. Oh, but that's not what you did. You're really smart, right? You're really smart and you can engage and talk about the philosophy. Well, then let's do it, hot shots! I'm ready for it. All right, until next time. See ya.